Martha had always been a careful girl, but life in the city had chipped away at her caution. The buzz of streetlights and the constant hum of traffic felt like a security blanket, warding off the darkness that she knew lurked just beneath the surface of the city's bustling exterior. She lived in a small, modest apartment on the third floor of an old, creaking building in the quietest part of town. It was the kind of place where you thought you knew your neighbors, but in reality, you were just another stranger passing by, another face behind closed doors. Her days were spent working long hours as a waitress at a nearby diner. Nights, however, were different. Nights were when she allowed herself to unwind, to relax in front of the television, and to slip into the world of crime shows and psychological thrillers. Martha was drawn to these shows, perhaps too drawn, but they filled her with an adrenaline that made her life feel less monotonous. Little did she know, soon she wouldn't need a screen to experience that rush of fear. It started on a rainy Tuesday night. Martha had just come home from work, her soaked hair plastered to her face as she fumbled with her keys in the lock. The hallway was dimly lit, the overhead bulbs flickering slightly as if they were on the verge of burning out. She thought nothing of it, just tired and wanting to be inside her warm apartment. As she opened the door and stepped in, she noticed something off. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, a slight shift in the air, a faint, unfamiliar scent, like cologne, but it was so faint that she brushed it off, thinking it was probably just something she picked up from the diner. Martha shut the door behind her, bolted the lock, and let out a deep sigh of relief. The familiar sounds of her apartment greeted her, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of her upstairs neighbor's television. She kicked off her shoes and headed to the bathroom for a quick shower. As the water cascaded down her body, the unease she felt earlier slowly dissipated. She was just being paranoid, she told herself. After all, she lived in a safe part of town. Nothing ever happened here. But when she stepped out of the shower, she felt it again, that eerie sensation that something was wrong. This time, it was more pronounced. Her breath hitched as her eyes darted around the small bathroom. Everything looked normal, but there was this growing dread gnawing at her, like a faint whisper in the back of her mind that she couldn't quite make out. Shaking it off, Martha dressed quickly and stepped into the living room. She froze. The remote that she had left on the armrest of her couch this morning was now on the floor. A cold chill snaked down her spine. Her first thought was that maybe she knocked it over on her way in. Maybe her keys brushed against it. But deep down, she knew better. Her heart started to race, her pulse quickening as she approached the couch. She crouched down and picked up the remote, scanning the room. Everything else seemed to be in its place. Nothing was missing. But that scent, faint, but there, lingering in the air like a ghost. Martha turned on the television, trying to drown out the unsettling thoughts swirling in her mind. The crime show she had been watching the night before flickered on the screen, and she tried to lose herself in its fictional danger, convincing herself that her fears were just that, fictional. The next few days passed without incident. She told herself it was all in her head. But then, on Friday night, she came home late after a double shift. As she stepped into her apartment, something made her stop dead in her tracks. The hallway light was off. She never turned it off. Her blood ran cold as she slowly reached for the light switch, her fingers trembling. When the light flickered on, she saw it, a note. A single, folded piece of paper sitting on the hallway floor. Her heart thundered in her chest as she bent down to pick it up. The paper felt rough, like it had been crumpled and smoothed out again. She unfolded it, her fingers shaking. The message was simple, written in neat, almost elegant handwriting. "I've been watching you." Martha's breath caught in her throat, and she felt like the ground was falling away beneath her. The walls of her apartment seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with the weight of fear. She didn't know what to do. Should she call the police? Should she run? She bolted the door behind her, double-checking the lock, and grabbed her phone, her hand shaking so badly she could barely dial. Her heart pounded in her ears as she waited for the police to pick up, but the minutes dragged on. Then the line went dead. Her stomach twisted in knots. She glanced down at her phone, seeing the dreaded "no service" message glaring back at her. Panic surged through her veins. What was going on? She raced to her window, hoping to see signs of life on the street below. But the streets were eerily quiet, bathed in the yellow glow of street lamps. Her breath fogged the window as she stood frozen, her mind racing with possibilities. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from her bedroom. Martha's blood turned to ice. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, but her legs felt like lead. Slowly, painfully, she turned toward the hallway that led to her bedroom. The sound came again, closer this time. She wanted to scream, but her throat felt constricted, the sound trapped inside her. The only thing she could hear now was her own heartbeat, loud and erratic in her ears. Martha grabbed a kitchen knife, her trembling fingers barely able to hold onto it, and crept toward the bedroom door. The silence was unbearable. She reached the door and pushed it open slowly, her breath catching as she stepped inside. Nothing. The room was empty, just as she had left it that morning. But the sense of dread hadn't left. If anything, it had grown. It was as if the walls themselves were hiding something, watching her. Then she saw it. Her closet door was ajar. She had closed it before leaving for work. Her body went cold. She stared at the gap in the door, her mind a swirl of fear and disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not to her. Taking a deep breath, Martha gripped the knife tighter and stepped toward the closet. She reached out, fingers trembling, and yanked the door open. Empty. Relief washed over her for a brief moment, but then something shifted behind her. A shadow. Before she could react, a hand clamped over her mouth. Cold, rough, and strong. Her scream was muffled as she felt the sharp edge of a blade press against her neck. "Shh," a voice whispered, low and menacing, right into her ear. "You're going to do exactly as I say." Martha's heart pounded so loudly she thought it might explode. Her mind raced. She had no idea who this man was, how long he had been watching her, or why. The man forced her to sit down on the bed, still holding the knife to her throat. "You're going to make this easy for me, aren't you?" His voice was chillingly calm, almost playful. Martha nodded, tears streaming down her face, her entire body trembling with fear. She couldn't see his face in the darkness, but she could feel his hot breath on her skin, smell the sickening scent of stale cologne. It was the same scent she had noticed in her apartment days ago. He had been here before. For what felt like an eternity, he stood there, watching her, playing with the knife in his hand. He seemed to enjoy her fear, the way her body shook with terror. Then, suddenly, he was gone. He slipped out of the apartment as silently as he had entered, leaving her there, broken and terrified. The police came later, after she managed to get her phone working again. They found no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints, no clues. It was as if the man had been a ghost, slipping through the cracks in reality to torment her. But the nightmare wasn't over. Over the next few weeks, the notes continued, each one more menacing than the last. "I'm closer than you think. I could be right behind you." She stopped sleeping. She barely ate. Every sound, every shadow became a potential threat. She tried to move, to leave the city, but the man always seemed to know where she was going before she even got there. It was as if he was always one step ahead, always watching. One night, desperate and exhausted, Martha decided to confront him. She set up hidden cameras around her apartment, determined to catch him in the act. She sat in her darkened living room, waiting. Hours passed. The air was thick with tension, every creak of the floorboard sending her heart into overdrive. And then, just as she was about to give up, she saw it. A shadow moving in the corner of the room. Slowly, silently, the figure emerged from the darkness. It was him. The man who had been haunting her for weeks. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, a second figure appeared, a woman, her face twisted into a cruel smile. Martha's blood ran cold as she realized the truth. This wasn't just one man stalking her. This was something far more sinister. The couple moved toward her, their footsteps silent, their eyes filled with a hunger that made Martha's stomach churn. She backed away, her body shaking uncontrollably, but there was nowhere to go. They had her cornered. And then, with a smile that sent shivers down her spine, the man spoke. "We've been waiting for this moment, Martha. You should have been more careful." Her scream echoed through the empty apartment, but there was no one to hear it, no one to save her. In the end, it wasn't the city that broke Martha. It was the darkness that had been lurking all along, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. If you enjoyed Martha's terrifying descent into the shadows, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more chilling stories. And always remember, the danger you can't see is often the one closest to you. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and good night.